now, I don't even know how long. And every time I read through, I keep thinking how much it fits where we are and what we're doing. And I've been spending a lot of time in the last probably over a year, even maybe a couple years, but more intensely over the last year, really thinking and really being taught about the whole area of the fact that we have an enemy. And we hear it, we've said it here multiple times, but I don't think for myself, I've been a Christian since I was 15 years old, and I don't think I really understood what that meant. I didn't really understood how that affected me, how that affected my family, how that affected the people around me. And I think we see this like right off the bat in the book of Nehemiah, and it's going to travel all the way through. There is going to be a theme that when God calls us to something, there is going to be a challenge, always in our lives. When I'm taking a coaching class right now, and this last Tuesday we do a webinar, so there's 16 of us and we all get online and talk and type, and it's really weird. I'm just like, this is weird. I don't like it because I'm a face-to-face person. But my coaching buddy, you have a friend that you have to talk to every week and practice on each other. My coaching buddy Mary and I volunteered this last Tuesday for her to coach, and I was the coachee. So I had to put in my little request on what I wanted to be coached on, and then she took me through a sample of how to coach. And I do have to say that Ruby said we did a good job. And we won a prize. And so I won this prize, and both got books, and it came in the mail, I think yesterday actually. I just love it when Amazon delivers something to my front door. It feels like Christmas, like every time I'm, something's here, what did we get? It's usually for Taylor, but it's still fun. So anyways, I got this book, and it's called The Dream Giver. And it's basically an allegory about, his name is Nobody, and he lives in the town of Ordinary. And the whole idea behind it is that he has been given a dream by the dream giver. And in everybody's heart, that there is a dream, there's a purpose and a call in our lives. And I feel like for us, definitely God has a purpose and a call for us. And just like with Nehemiah, it's going to take prayer, it's going to take fasting, it's going to take focus, it's going to take planning, it's going to take preparation. And when the king says to us, what do you need? We're going to be ready because we will have gone through that process. And so we know that last week we talked about the fact that Nehemiah had gone to the king as the cupbearer. Remember, his face was sad. He was very discouraged. He'd never been sad in front of the king before. We remember that when you are sad in front of the king, that could mean the end of your days. But he did it because he was just authentically grieving for what was going on in the city and what was happening with the walls around Judah. And so he tells the king, when the king asks him, this is what's happening, and would you be willing to send me? And he had an answer for the questions that the king asked him. And I think that God wants us to be ready to have an account for the things that we go to ask him for. Sometimes I think that we ask for kind of really general things. We talked about this a little bit too. God bless America. Well, that's great, but let's be specific. If our children came to us and just asked some really big general request, it's difficult for us to oblige them. We want to know, what is it that you need? I remember when, not my children, but some children that lived in my house when they were young, used to come sometimes and they would ask, or they wouldn't ask for anything, they would tell me something. Mom, Jessica's fill in the blank, whatever it was. And I would just look at them. All right. You made a statement. You didn't ask me a question. You didn't ask for my help. It was like I wanted to try to teach them, if you'd like me to help you, then ask me for what you need. And that's kind of how I think it can be with God sometimes. We can go, and not that we don't go to God with our whole heart, and we can lay out our complaints, we can lay out our worries, we can lay out our brokenness to Him. But what He wants to hear from us is, so, my child, what is it that you need? What is it that you're requesting? Come to me specifically. Come boldly into my throne. Come sit on my lap. Come tell me your heart. Pray without ceasing. He tells us all that stuff about prayer. It's really important that when we go, we're specific. And so Nehemiah was. And so when he went, we know that what happened was that the king said to him, okay, what do you need? And this is what Nehemiah said, just as a little bit of review. He said in verse 7 and 8, let me not read you the message. I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the king's forest, so he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of God was upon me, the king granted my request. So I went to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. The king had also sent army officers and cavalrymen. So he knew specifically what he wanted. He knew what his job was going to be. It was going to be to rebuild the walls and rebuild the gates. See, there's something really important, I think, about being focused. It's kind of like when you have a goal, if there's no focus, if there's no direction, the likelihood is you're not going to hit it. Most likely, it's not going to happen. We've all heard this stuff about if you write down a goal, the likelihood of it becoming true. I don't even know what the percentage of it that it goes up. But even if you don't ever look at it again, just if you write it down, it really increases the possibility of that coming true. If you write it down and then you read it, it even goes up higher. And so my question to us is when we look at our lives, when we think about where we want to be, because all of us kind of probably have a little bit, hopefully, a picture of this is what I would like my life to be like. And especially for some of us here who are on the younger end of the scale, it's like you have dreams and you have goals, and not that you still don't when you get older, but you're kind of smack dab in the middle of life going, all right, this is what I would like my life to be. If you don't know that, I would really encourage you to think that. Because we're not going to stumble into our calling and purpose. It just doesn't happen that way. We're not going to stumble into making an impact in the kingdom. We're not going to stumble into being generous. We're not going to stumble into having a great marriage or having kids that understand obedience and love and compassion and all these things and the qualities that we desire. It doesn't happen that way. We don't just stumble into them. They're intentional. They're intentional. They're directed. And if you get to a certain age and you look back and you go, man, nobody pretty much gets to where they are and thinks, life turned out perfectly just like I wanted. But if you get there and you had no direction, what's going to happen is life is going to take you wherever it wants you to go. Even as a Christian, even though we pray and we seek God, if we don't feel like we are following Him and being obedient to where He's leading us, we're going to end up somewhere that maybe God never planned for us to be. So being intentional, that's what we're going to start talking about. What is the reason that we exist as a body here? Why did God bring us together? I know He has a reason, but we have to discover it. It's like there's a mine, with gold in it, and God just doesn't dump the gold out on, outside of the cave. He says, go in and mine it. Bring in the pick, bring in the helmet, with a little light. It's sweaty, it's messy, it's dirty, but it's worth it. If you want to have the qualities of God, if you want to have the fruit of the Spirit in your life, you're not going to just stumble into those things. They're there, but they have to be nurtured. And once you start tasting them, hopefully it will propel us forward to want more. Whenever I find a really good piece of fruit, like every once in a while we'll go to Costco and we'll get some awesome nectarines. And I'm just like, every day I think about those nectarines, I want to cut them up. I know, this is probably really weird. But it's hard to find good fruit. Can I get an amen? It's hard to find some food that actually tastes like food. And so it's like I bite into it and it's juicy and it's wonderful and I want more and I want it like that. And then the next time I go, we went this last time, we got nectarines. They look good, they seem to smell good, and they went bad really fast. Like Jessica went and pulled one out of the fridge today because she was over, and it was moldy. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what was different, but I knew what I liked, and I knew what I wanted, and I knew what I didn't, and I had that to compare with. We don't know what life is going to throw our way. We have no idea. There's a woman who works at the school, or whose kids went to the school where Michael works. And one of the teachers there actually that passed away a couple years ago, his wife posts, and I don't even know how I became her friend because I'm not really I don't have lots of Facebook friends, but I'm a friend. And she posted something the other day about this mom who their family had gone, just was there in Maui. They went to Maui, this 2-week trip, both sets of parents, all the kids are having a blast. They've been out body surfing. It's just been so fun. She's a young woman, probably in her 30s. And she went out, not far from the shore, not far from her husband, and this wave came and it just slammed her. And it wasn't even like big waves. It was just kind of average waves that they were body surfing in. It slammed her, but just the right force at just the right place at just the right time. Hit her in the neck, and down she went. And she died of it. They never planned it. They never thought that was going to be their life. I'm sure they had all kinds of dreams and goals. But when you read this husband's post, you go, this is a man whose faith is holding him together. It is holding him together because he knows that he's lost his wife, but he knows that God is so big that even something as tragic as this, he can trust the plans of God. I don't believe God planned that for her. I don't believe God caused that. I don't believe that. I don't think God just said, we're going to send this wave, we're going to take her out, we're going to take her young. I don't think that's how God works. But I do believe that circumstances came together right at the right moment and it happened. And that God was immediately in it. He was immediately caring for her and her family. And the body of Christ rose up and is loving them. So see, we don't know what's going to come, but that doesn't mean we don't plan. We need to plan. Because one day you're going to wake up and your oldest child is going to be turning 30 in September, and you're going to go, how did that happen? Because I still think that I should be 30. Right? And in between today and then, there's going to be great memories and wonderful things, and there's going to be hard things. But if we're planning for the things that are going to bring fruit in our lives, and if we're ready when the King says to us, what do you need? See, I think we have to go out and check out this Chinese church. I think we have to go out and meet with Lance. I think we have to do labor. We don't just wait and go, God, I just hope you drop this option in our lives. Last, he could, and he could if he wants to. But we still have to pursue, right? And that comes from us spending time with him and listening to him. And so Nehemiah was so ready. He knew exactly what he needed. And then here was the great thing. We might not even have noticed this. It's really easy to skip over. But he asked for the letters so he can get through passage, all the way through this territory. And then he asked for the timber so he can actually do the physical work. But then the king does something above and beyond. And it said, the king also sent with him an army of officers and a cavalry. See, he didn't just go. He had the letters to keep him safe. He had what he needed for supplies. But then this army went with him. See, there's an angel army, the heavenly host. When that phrase is in the Bible, it is an angel army. Not the angels like the cute little, cherub ones with their little naked buns, their little tiny wings and all of that, the little halo. That's not what angels are. Angels, we talked about this right when we first started meeting. They are mighty warriors. And there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of angels all around us. Even in the Word it says, be sure to be hospitable to a stranger because you don't even know you might have entertained an angel unaware. There are angels. I don't get that. I don't see them. I have a friend actually who had an encounter with an angel. I believe her. She's not wacky. She's very balanced. And she and her mother both had an encounter with an angel after her father committed suicide. This angel came. It's mighty. She just talks about big, ominous. But whenever an angel would enter, remember that the angel would say, "Don't be afraid." So although they're there and they're ominous and they're big and they're unseen, the Lord sends this army with us. See, he doesn't call us to do something and then go, see you later, I hope it works out, high-five you, get on the other side, I'll be there waiting, I'll be cheering you on when you get here. No, he sends his army with us. And he does it because he knows there is a battle. There is a battle every day for our hearts. Every single day from the moment we were born, our there was a battle for our hearts. We are so, I think, so accustomed to it that we just think that this is sometimes the best that it gets, until all of a sudden we become aware. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit in a minute. But the king and our king sends an army of protection around us. Does that mean bad things never happen to us? No, they happen to us. 30-year-old moms die. War rages in countries. People lose jobs. People lose homes. It just happens. But it doesn't mean for 1 second we've ever been out of the view or the protection or the care of God. We live in a fallen world, guys. It's broken. It was from the minute that the sin happened in the garden, the world is dying. The sin affects our world. But in all of that, God has a plan. And He's on the move. And He's making things new again, and as they should be. And someday, it'll all be new. And so Nehemiah was about the work of God. God had laid this on his heart. And because of God's favor, that's what he said, because of the mighty hand of God. He's going to repeat that a few times in here. Because of that, he knew that he was going to be able to go into this plan of God's. And he knew it was God's plan. So he said, when Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, they were very disturbed that someone would come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. So remember, he's got his letters, he's going through Chandler. Here you go, Governor Michael. Here you go, Governess Jean. Here you go, Governor Ron. Safe passage, the king of Persia has said, let me through. Well, he comes to Sanballat, who we believe was one of the governors, and his sidekick, who was a slave who had been exalted to this position that he was in, and all of a sudden, the trouble begins. See, when he was dreaming about it, when he was writing it down, when he was thinking, remember we talked about this, the enemy wasn't really doing a whole lot, but the minute that it was going to take territory from them, the minute it was going to encroach on something that they had free reign, he was mad. Because up until this point, because the walls were broken down, because the gates were burned, even though worship was going on in the temple, they could come anytime they want, take what they want, and leave. They could be as forceful as they wanted, and they did not want for Judah to regain its status as a mighty city. See, it's no different with our enemy. His name is Satan. He disguises himself as an angel of light. He looks good. It looks like it's kind of true. He looks like, hey, this might be God. He's a liar. He's a deceiver. He's an accuser. Remember, steal, kill, and destroy. He is wicked. Greater is he who is in us, though, than he who is in the world. We don't have to be afraid of him, but we need to be aware of him. We need to be aware of him. And the little pitchfork and the horns and the tail, all of those kind of images are part of the plan so that we think, oh, it's not a big deal. No, it is a big deal. Because the minute that Nehemiah started this, and the minute that his enemy knew that he was going to lose out on something, he came on strong. And that's exactly what the enemy will do in our lives. The minute that we begin tasting freedom, the minute that we recognize a place of bondage in our lives, the minute that God wants to get to the root of something, and we've been operating out here with all these emotions and thoughts, and not even realize that the reason I act like this is because of something deep that wounded me inside my heart. And once we start touching that, and we're going to take back what is ours from what has been stolen from us, the heat just gets turned up. I feel like that. I feel like the heat has been so intense the last few weeks, like so intense that I'm like, I kind of thought the other day, like, you know what? I just don't want to do this anymore. It's hard. Nehemiah could have said, you know what? I'm just going to stay here in my really cushy job, being the top dog, having all this influence. He could have done that because he knew, even though God had put this on his heart, he knew it was going to cost him something. just leaving was costing him something. He knew that because he knew he somehow had to get safe passage from point A to point B. The enemy wants to lull us to sleep. He wants us to be apathetic. He wants us to be in a rut. He wants us to go through life just thinking like this is all there is. I get up, I go to work, I take care of my home, and I do it again the next day. I get up, I go to work. Maybe I serve, maybe I give, maybe I do this or that and there. Not that those are bad things, but he doesn't want us to be intentional. He doesn't want us to be focused. He doesn't want us to be mighty. He just wants us to be apathetic. Can you relate to that? And so they heard, and it says they were very disturbed. That's a nice way to put they were so ticked off. They were so angry. They were so undone by the fact that Nehemiah was going to do this thing. And sometimes when we feel like we hear the Lord and we're on a path, just because opposition comes does not mean that God didn't say that. That's another one of those disguises an angel of light. Satan's favorite line is, did God really say that? It's what he said in the garden. It's what he keeps saying. He doesn't have a lot of tricks up his sleeve. That's one of his favorite. Did he really say that? I don't know. Maybe because you know what? It's really hard. Really, why are you meeting in your house with your people? Did he really say that? Because it's hard. Yeah, I think he did. I know he did. Does that mean it's easy? No. But does that mean it's fruitful and great? Yeah, it is. It is. So you keep doing it. Not because it's easy, but because it's God's time and His truth and His purpose. So I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few men. I had not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. That's verse 11. And there were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. And by night I went out through the valley gate toward the Jackal. So he's there 3 days. Now, I don't know if you guys remember this, but this is an 800-mile trek. 3 months. He didn't just travel like, hey, I'm walking down to AJ's from my house. It takes 15 minutes. I'll be there. This was 800 miles. I don't like to drive the 16 hours or whatever it takes to get to California a lot of times. It's like, oh, man, 6 hours. 3 months. Sometimes I want to give up on something hard after 3 days. Maybe some of us sometimes want to give up on something hard after 3 hours. I know little people who want to give up on something hard after 3 minutes or 3 seconds. Pick up your Legos. It's just like, oh my gosh, it's so horrible. And they pick up one. No, like all of them. I know it seems overwhelming, but if we just keep doing one at a time, it'll get done. One at a time, faithfully, day in and day out. For 3 months he goes. And so he gets there and he's probably exhausted after traveling that far. I know the first thing I want to do after we travel on one trip is I just want to go shower and get refreshed and kind of get settled. And so he is there 3 days and he decides to, he had to make a spectacle, you guys. He's coming in, I just picture it like the circus. When the circus comes into town, this was a big ball, so there were a lot of big, huge, timber. When we were in Nehemiah, we used to go to this camp called Woodley, and it's up in the Sierra Nevada mountains. So it's way north of Sacramento, and it's gorgeous, but it's a logging area. And the way the camp was at that point, and it's changed since, was here was the camp, and then here was a winding little road, and then across that road was the lake and the horses and all of these other fun things. And so as campers and leaders, you had to cross this road. Well, it was a logging road. And so logging trucks with huge, big, cargo of logs. Have you ever seen that where you just see all these logs going down, tied up? They would be barreling down that road, and there's no way they're stopping. It's like you're going to lose if the truck is coming down the road. And so it was always like a I remember just going, look, run! Like impressed. It wasn't a very big road, but it was always like I would feel responsible for, all these little ducklings. These are some of these teenagers that they said, here, I'm trusting you with them for a week, and it's like, okay, and because I was a mom, my heightened responsibility, was like, whoo. And so they're coming into town, and they're coming in with logs, because they're going to build gates, and they're going to build walls, and they're going to build a house for Nehemiah. They're getting a home. And they're coming in with an army. Don't you think people would have been a little curious? Like, what the heck is he doing? And so they get in, and he doesn't tell anybody what he's doing. I'm sure people were kind of going a little nuts about that. Like, okay. And so he decides to go check out what's going on, because he's only heard of it till this point. And there's something different between hearing about something and actually going and seeing for it yourself. When I was going through my interview process at Bethany, I remember, I did not even know who was around the table. I can't even remember. I think I might have interviewed with Teresa Board on the phone. I'm not really sure. I think Kathy Bartow, another person I was just talking about, might have been there. I don't even know who was around the table interviewing me. I can't even remember. But I remember this question, because this is one of those interview questions. What will be the first thing you do if you come to Bethany? And my answer was not difficult. It was not difficult for me. There was two things that I said. The first is to take what's working and make it better. But then the other part is that I'm going to survey the walls, just like Nehemiah. I'm going to walk around and I'm going to see, and I'm going to look, and get to know people and build relationships, because I'm not going to cut anything until I know what's healthy and what's not healthy. Now, I had lots of people come through my office and say, this is what you need to do, and this is what you need to do. And I don't even remember, it felt like the enemy. I remember this one person came and immediately, probably within days of me getting this job, she had a whole agenda. And I said, no. Oh my gosh, no one had ever said no to this woman, ever, apparently. And fortunately, the person who was my supervisor at that time, I went to him and I said, I need you to cover my back. I made this decision. Are you gonna cover my back? Are you gonna watch out for me? And he was like, yes, I will. And this woman had eaten up all kinds of people at the church. And after that point, she never bugged me again, because it was like, no means no. I love you. I'll be your friend, and we'll work on things. And if you want to join in, but I'm not doing that. I've been here for 4 seconds. I'm not going to incorporate your plan. I haven't even heard from Jesus yet. And so Nehemiah is sneaking out at night, and he's on this little, animal, mule, donkey, whatever, and just because he wanted to do it in quiet, he wanted to see for himself. So he starts making his way around the wall, and he's with a small group of people. I think that sometimes God, that's how he does it. When you see churches that get planted, they tend to be, there was 3 families in the living room. You hear that, Cornerstone. That's how Cornerstone started. I think 3 or 4 or 5 families sitting in the living room. It's a huge church. Not that that's the goal, but you know what I mean? That he just brings a little group of people to say, let's survey the walls. What does the Lord need right now? What does he want? Where's he moving? How's he working? And where does he want us to join in on? I think that's what he's doing with us. So he went and he surveyed the walls. And it said that he got to one point that his mount, he couldn't even get through it because there was so much rubble. So he had to kind of change his path and go a different direction. But he knew once he came back, he knew what was going on. He knew what was happening, or what I was doing, because as yet I had said nothing to the Jews or the priests or the nobles or the officials or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, so now he's got it off, he has a picture of what's going on. Now he really knows. And we know Nehemiah is a praying man. We know he is. So I picture that he takes this information back, and this is just my kind of picture, but I picture he does that, and then he says, okay, Lord, what do we do with this? I sure hope he did. I can't imagine he wouldn't. All right, here it is. This is a huge job. I cannot do this job. You can't do this job. But God can do this job through us and with us. I can't do the life on my own without Jesus. about Jesus, because I don't know about you, but once you begin to see freedom and understand where you've been in bondage, it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction, and you just go back there very easily and very quickly if you start operating out of your own resources, out of your own power. And so I'm sure that Nehemiah went down and he prayed and he sought God's counsel. And he said to them, you see the trouble we are in, verse 17. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and the gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told him about the gracious hand of God upon me, and what the king had said to me. So he enlists this community. He comes with a plan. He knows what he's talking about. You know, people don't want to follow somebody who have no idea what they're talking about, who don't have a plan or a direction. They want to follow somebody, hopefully, who has heard from God. That's the hope. And Nehemiah makes it very clear that where this came from and how this is even happening is by whose hand? By whose hand?
God.
By God's hand. That's right. And he says this over and over. I told them about the gracious hand of my God upon me and what the king said to me. See, that's how we witness, that's how we share truth with people. We tell them God's story. I picture that in a year from now, maybe, I don't even know that it'll have to be 2 years from now. I picture in a year from now, we'll be sitting around with people to whatever degree God has chosen to multiply us. And we'll be going, I'll have to ask you guys because I won't remember because I already had to do that. Now, how did this happen? How did we start? What was the catalyst? And we'll be talking about that. And you know what? I believe that we will say because of who that I know that you are. We will say, it was because the gracious hand of God was on us. It was the gracious hand of God. And that's the only way we want to. That's the only way we want to move forward. Would be because the gracious hand of God was upon us. Not because we put together some slick campaign or some really good flyer to go out in the neighborhood, or we gave away a prize. Everybody come get a free iPad. I don't know. I don't want to do that. And I don't think you do, or we wouldn't be sitting. It's not about that. Not that you can't be creative, not that you can't reach out and do fun things in your community and neighborhood, but we don't want to be the people who we think we're making it happen, but then we kind of pretend and say that it's God. Do you know what I mean by that? It's like you can go, oh, thank you, God, after we made it happen. After we were slick enough and clever enough to do that. No. I want it to be so obvious that people are going to go, there is no way this could happen with this little ragamuffin group of people. It had to be the gracious hand of God. And I actually think that it's an honor that God would choose to use us. Don't you? We're not slick enough. Some of us are cool, but I'm not cool enough, we're not young enough. It's just like we're not the right model. Michael and I are definitely not the right model. Jean and Ron are not the right model. You're supposed to be like 30 and wear these cool shirts with little snaps, and you're not supposed to be a female, that's for sure. And it's like, no, but see, it doesn't matter with God. He took Nehemiah out of this position, and the king said yes, because it was the gracious hand of God. And don't you love it in your life when you can look back and you go, oh man, that was the gracious hand of God. Look where I was a month ago, 6 months ago, a year ago. That's the gracious hand of God. Think about your lives for a minute. Think about who you were not too long ago, where you were going, what your trajectory was in your life. I hope that you can see, wow, the gracious hand. I will be gone from my previous job in a year, the end of August, a year. And it's like, I would have never written this story. I had no idea. And I love it. I love this story. I love this story. I love being in this story. It's just so And it's all because of the gracious God. And so, it said that, then they replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and Geshem the Arab heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing, they asked. Are you rebelling against the king? Right away. Now, you notice that they went from 2 to 3. Didn't take that long. Now there's a third. And they come to him and they mocked him. And you know what? That's what our enemy does. He mocks us. Who are you to think that God wants to do anything with a handful of people sitting in a living room? I mean, what audacity. Well, it's not us, it's God. And so what I love about what Nehemiah did with the enemy was instead of doing like toe-to-toe with him, like, well, no, but the king said this, and look, I have my letters, and look at the timber, and look at all these things that have happened. He doesn't do this. He completely ignores the mocking. And he says to him, I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem, or any claim, or any historic right to it. I want to leave us with this. The enemy was right there at the beginning. There was trouble, there was persecution, but Nehemiah didn't stop. He went, he surveyed, he prayed, he listened, he planned. And then he presented, and he invited. See, when we are excited about something, when we feel like God is in something, we're actually going to not be able to help but invite people. Like, no, come. I really want you to. This is great. I want to share this with you. And not just this, but Jesus. Like, no, I really want to share. I was not free, and now I'm free. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. And so he says to him, he doesn't even acknowledge this false accusation, the steal, kill, destroy, the liar, the accuser. But he says instead, you know what? You have no right to this territory. You have no right to what is mine and has been given to me by God. That's what we can tell the enemy. You have no right. You cannot steal from me. You cannot try to kill my dreams, kill my heart. You cannot destroy my family. You cannot destroy my children. You cannot destroy me because greater is he who's in me than he who is in the world. That we have the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. We have God Almighty. We have this angel army. He's powerful. Jesus came as a servant, but he was not weak. You cannot be weak and choose to lay your life down on the cross. That takes so much strength that I will hopefully never have to live through or understand. But see, here's what we do. We have to recognize that there's an enemy. But we have to know first and foremost that the gracious hand of God is on us. And he will give us favor. And he will complete the dream that he has put together. But when the enemy comes and he tries to put in his little plan, we could choose to say, oh no, that's not true, and do this whole reasoning thing in our mind. Ever do that where you just kind of try to reason it away and try to wrestle with it in your intellect? We're going to lose every time we do that. Not that we don't use our minds, not that that's not important, God has given us a mind, but the way that we operate with him is to speak truth. And that's exactly what Nehemiah did. Nope, that's not true. This is God's thing. I'm on God's journey. He's going to complete it. He's going to make it happen in me the way he wants me to live, and also within the call upon my life and my future and my direction. And you have no say here. When we start understanding that, we will start living in freedom. We will start walking in freedom. And I can tell you, there is nothing more worth our energy and intention than to get free. Because Jesus said, I have come to set the captives free. I have come Let me pray. Father, thank you so much for the way that you love us. And your word is just this continual great message to us that you are in this life with us, that you've gone before us, that you are a rear guard, that you have hemmed us in from before and behind. Lord, I just pray in the name of Jesus right now that if there is any place in our lives where we have gotten used to the rubble, where we just step over it or maneuver around it, where we see the brokenness, and we just have learned to live with a limp, I pray that, Lord, that you would reveal that to us right now, that you would make that clear to our eyes and our hearts and our minds. And Lord, help us to not be content with living that substandard life, but instead help us to join with you in the rebuilding. That the name of the Lord is a strong tower and the righteous run in it, and they will be safe. In your name we pray. Amen. I would like us to just pray with each other. Shauna, next week is our prayer, right? Time? We need more light. Can you turn some light? So what we're trying